I signed the divorce papers on a Tuesday. By Friday night, I was perched on a bar stool at Elixir, one of Kansas City's most exclusive lounges, dressed in a black cocktail. Dress that cost more than my first car, while a 20-some bartender with tattooed forearms tried to get me drunk enough to forget my own name another. Manhattan, Miss Hughes, he asked, already reaching for the whiskey the amber liquid slushed against. Crystal, as I nodded, my wedding ring finger still bearing the pale indentation of a band worn for 8 years of morning coffees, shared dreams and promises, 8 years, culminating in finding my husband balls. Deep in his administrative assistant on our anniversary, make it strong, I whispered, my voice sounding foreign even. To myself, the bass from the nightclub downstairs vibrated through the solace of my Louis Vuittons, a dull thrumming that matched the ache in my chest. 3 days since the divorce was finalized, 3 days of congratulatory texts from friends saying things like "you're free now," and his lost 3 days of staring at the ceiling of my penthouse apartment, wondering how someone builds a life from scratch at 38, the man. Hatton arrived with a blood-red cherry drowning at the bottom. I swirled it with a thin black straw, watching the vortex form and dissipate just like my marriage. Zoe Hughes, a voice from behind, made me stiffen. I turned slowly, my shoulders squared in the defensive posture I'd perfected during boardroom battles at Hughes Marketing Williams. Stood there, an old college friend I hadn't seen in years before. I could respond. He embraced me, his cologne sandalwood and something citrusy enveloping me like a memory I heard about. He paused, searching for the right words. "Everything are you okay?" The lie formed easily on my tongue. Never better, just celebrating my new freedom. His eyes kind familiar. I saw right through it. Right, that's why you're alone at a bar looking like someone died. Something to die, I said, the whiskey making my tongue loose, the version of me that believed in forever. William slid onto the stool next to mine, ordering a scotch neat, before turning those perceptive eyes back to me. "Tell me what really happened, not the sanitized version you're telling everyone." Else the Manhattan suddenly tasted bitter. I pushed it away, my fingernails painted the exact shade of crimson as the cherry clicking against the bar top. He didn't just cheat. I finally admitted the words, scraping my throat like shards of glass. He emptied our joint savings account first, said he needed to find himself, apparently finding himself meant in the arms of a 24-year-old while financing her apartment in the Crossroads district. William remained silent, a courtesy few had offered. As the gossip spread through Kansas City's tight-knit business community, the worst part, I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. I saw the signs for years, the late meetings, the business trips that produced no contracts. The way he stopped looking at me during conversations, a single tear escaped despite my best efforts, sliding down my cheek and landing on the black fabric of my dress, invisible, but felt like so much else in my life. "You deserved better," William said simply. I laughed, the sound brittle even to my own ears. Maybe not. Maybe this is exactly what I deserve for building my entire identity around being Anthony Hughes's perfect wife while building his perfect empire. The confession hung between us, unexpected and raw. I hadn't admitted that to anyone, not even my therapist. "What happens now?" William asked, signaling the bartender for water instead of another round. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of possibility and terror in equal measure. "I don't know. The company's half mine. The house is sold. My clothes are in storage, except for what fits in the penthouse closet. And your heart?" The question caught me off guard, sending a tremor through fingers that had confidently signed million dual contracts just hours earlier, currently unavailable for comment. We sat in companionable silence as the evening crowd thickened around us, successful men and women with bright smiles and dead eyes, all playing the same game of pretend happiness. "I should go," I finally said, gathering my clutch and standing carefully aware of the 3 Manhattans threatening my balance. William walked me to the door, his hand a gentle pressure at the small of my back. "You're going to be okay. Zoe, not tonight, maybe not tomorrow." But eventually, I kissed his cheek, a gesture of gratitude for the rare gift of honest conversation. Thank you for not asking about the envelope, I said quietly, his brow furrowed. What envelope? I smiled for the first time that evening. The one my ex-husband's assistant delivered this morning, the one I haven't opened yet because I'm afraid of what truths it might contain with that I stepped into the waiting. Uber certain of only one thing, whatever was in that sealed envelope would change everything. All over again the next morning, my head throbbed with regret and expensive whiskey. I dragged myself from bed, swallowing 2 aspirin with cold coffee before forcing myself into workout cloth. The envelope from yesterday remained unopened on my kitchen counter. A silent accusation I wasn't ready to face work had been my salvation since Anthony left as KIO founder of Hughes Marketing. I still commanded respect, even if my personal life was in shambles today, however, held no meetings or crisis. Calls, just a charity golf tournament our firm had sponsored normally. I'd send a junior executive as our representative, but today I craved fresh air and distraction. The Spring Valley golf clubs sprawled across meticulously maintained acres, offering Kansas City's elite a playground where business deals were sealed between putts. I adjusted my sunglasses, surveying the crowd. While waiting for the tournament to begin, men in pastel palas and women in pristine white visors clustered around the first tee, their laughter carrying across the morning air. Miss Hughes, they've paired you with the white architecture group for the first 9 holes. I nodded at the young tournament coordinator, my game face firmly in place. Golf had been Anthony's passion, not mine, but I've learned to play like so many other skills acquired during marriage to accompany him now. I played with calculated competence, another weapon in my professional arsenal. The white architecture foursome waited at the tee box. 2 men in standard corporate attire, and a woman whose presence immediately commanded attention. She stood slightly apart, adjusting her driver with practiced ease, her blonde hair catching sunlight in ways that seemed almost deliberate. When she looked up, startlingly green eyes assessed me with immediate interest. You must be our 4th, she said, extending a hand. Leslie, white architecture. Her grip was firm, her smile genuine. Something about her directness made me stand a little straighter. Zoe Hughes, marketing recognition flickered across her face, the woman behind the Westport development campaign. Brilliant work. Before I could respond, the tournament signal sounded and we took our positions. I watched Leslie's form as she addressed her ball, athletic, confident, a controlled power in her swing that sent the ball sailing in a perfect arc down the fairway. The men followed with adequate shots. Then it was my turn. I hadn't played in months. My palms felt sweaty against the grip, my stance awkward. The first swing was disastrous, sending the ball skittering into rough terrain. I muttered, heat rising to my cheeks. Leslie approached, standing close enough that I caught the scent of her perfume, something clean and herbaceous. Your grip is too tight, she said quietly. Mind if I show you before I could answer? She was behind me, her hands adjusting mine on the club. Relax your shoulders, she instructed, her breath warm against my ear. Let the club do the work. Something electric passed between us, a current of awareness that had nothing to do with golf tips. I stepped away a bit too quickly, unsettled by my body's immediate response. Thanks, I managed, taking another stance. This time the ball soared cleanly, landing just short of hers on the fairway. Beautiful, Leslie said with a smile that suggested she was just talking about the shot. As the morning progressed, our casual competition intensified. Leslie played with effortless skill while I found my rhythm, matching her hole for hole. The men in our foursome gradually became background characters in what felt increasingly like a private game between us. Where did you learn to play? She asked as we walked to the 7th hole, letting the men drift ahead. My ex-husband insisted I learn, said it was important for entertaining clients, and now I play for myself, I answered, surprising myself with the honesty. Leslie nodded. Divorce has a way of returning things to us, things we didn't realize we'd given away. The perceptiveness of her comment caught me off guard. You've been through it? No, she said, selecting a club from her bag, but I've watched enough friends navigate those waters to recognize the markers. By the 9th hole, our scores were tied, and a Comfortable camaraderie had developed between us as we headed toward the clubhouse for the mid-tournament brunch. Leslie touched my arm lightly. I enjoyed our match, she said, reaching into her pocket. My card, we've just won the bid for the Riverfront Plaza project, and we need a strong marketing partner. I accepted her business card, heavy stock, minimalist design, her name, and contact information, an elegant font. Call me. She added, those green eyes holding mine a moment longer than necessary for business, or maybe just another of golf. Something fluttered in my chest, anticipation, interest, warning. I couldn't tell, but watching Leslie White walk away, confident in her tailored golf attire, I felt more alive than I had in months. Back in my car, I studied her card again before tucking it into my wallet. The day had delivered an unexpected distraction from my problems and possibly a valuable business connection. That's all this was, I told myself firmly, yet driving home, I couldn't shake the memory of her hands adjusting mine on the club, or the subtle challenge in her eyes when she'd said, call me, for the first time since signing those divorce papers. I found myself thinking about someone other than Anthony and his betrayal. The envelope would have to wait another day. Leslie White's business card burned a hole in my wallet for 3 days before I finally called her. I'd rehearsed a dozen variations of the conversation in my head, all strictly professional, all focused on potential collaboration between our companies. Yet, when she answered, my carefully prepared script evaporated. I was wondering when I'd hear from you, Zoe Hughes, she said, her voice carrying a smile. I could almost see through the phone. I've been busy. I lied, staring at the still unopened envelope on my kitchen counter, but I'd like to discuss potential synergies between Hughes marketing and White architecture. Perfect coffee tomorrow. There's a place near my office called Monarch. 11 work for you. Simple as that. No games, no hesitation. Leslie's directness was refreshing after years of Anthony's evasions and half-truths. Monarch coffee proved to be a sleek industrial space with warm lighting and the rich aroma of freshly ground beans filling the air. I arrived 10 minutes early, selecting a table in the corner where I could watch the door. The familiar pre-meeting ritual, reviewing notes, checking emails, failed to calm my inexplicable nerves when Leslie entered. Several heads turned. She wore slim-fitting charcoal trousers and a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled to reveal tan forearms. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, emphasizing the clean lines of her face. She spotted me immediately, navigating between tables with graceful confidence. You look like you're preparing for a board meeting, not coffee, she observed, nodding toward my portfolio and tablet as she slid into the chair opposite. I closed my tablet, suddenly self-conscious, force of habit, good to have. But maybe we start with coffee and conversation before diving into business. She signaled a barista. Their cardamom latte is exceptional. If you're feeling adventurous throughout our coffee, Leslie asked questions about my background, my company, my vision, showing genuine interest rather than merely waiting for her turn to speak. I found myself sharing stories about building Hughes marketing from scratch, the challenges of being a woman in the industry, even my thoughts on Kansas City's developing urban land landscape. And what about you? I finally asked, realizing I'd been talking about myself far too long. How did you end up in sustainable landscape architecture? Leslie's eyes lit up. I grew up on a farm outside the city. My father taught me that working with the land, not against it, always yields better results. I carried that philosophy into my design work, as she described her projects: urban green spaces, sustainable water features, rooftop gardens. Her passion was contagious. I found myself leaning forward, captivated, not just by her vision, but by the animation in her expression, the way her hands moved as she spoke. One coffee became two, business discussion evolved into personal stories. Afternoon, shadows lengthened across our table. I should get back to the office, I finally said, checking my watch with genuine surprise. I had no idea it was so late. Time flies. In good company, Leslie remarked, her eyes holding mine for a beat. Too long. We should do this again that evening. I found myself thinking about Leslie's smile during a tedious budget meeting later. Alone in my penthouse, I caught myself replaying our conversation while preparing dinner, a simple salad that barely deserved the expensive wine. I'd opened to accompany it. This pattern continued over the following weeks. Coffee meetings became lunch dates, professional discussions evolved into personal confidences. I found myself checking my phone for texts from her, feeling an absurd flutter of excitement. When her name appeared on my screen, "You seem different lately," my assistant Carol remarked one afternoon after Leslie had stopped by the office with blueprints for a potential joint project. Different how Carol shrugged, less she hesitated, searching for the right word. Hardened, "You've been smiling more." I dismissed her observation with a practiced wave, but later catching my reflection. In the bathroom mirror, I noticed she was right. The tight lines around my mouth had softened. My eyes seemed brighter. The realization struck me with unexpected force while I was preparing for bed that night. The envelope from Anthony still sat unopened on my counter, but I hadn't thought about it or him in days. Instead, my mind had been filled with Leslie. Her insights on design, her dry humor, the way sunlight caught in her hair when we'd walk through the sculpture garden discussing her latest. Project my toothbrush paused mid-stroke as another realization hit me. I was attracted to her not just intellectually or professionally, but viscerally. The thought sent a jolt of panic through me. I was straight. I'd been married to a man for 8 years. This was just what post-divorce confusion, admiration, mistaken for attraction. My phone chimed with a text. "Leslie, still thinking about what you said about integrating natural elements into corporate spaces. We should continue that conversation." Dinner Friday, I stared at the screen, my heart racing inexplicably. This was dangerous territory, not because Leslie was a woman, but because for the first time since my divorce, I felt truly vulnerable. Before I could overthink it, I typed "looking forward to it" as I set my phone down. I caught my reflection again, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. Carol was right, I was different. And whether that terrified or exhilarated me remained to be seen. Anthony's unexpected supplier dinner cancellation felt like a reprieve rather than a disappointment. As I scrolled through my contacts, my finger hovered over Leslie's name before moving to Anthony James, my oldest friend in Kansas City and confidant through the divorce dinner emergency. I explained when he answered, "Need a +1 for tonight." Anthony laughed, "Lady, I've been your emergency date since college. What time? 8, Labadega." I hesitated before adding, "and thinks I need someone in my corner tonight." Anthony, charming, gay, and fiercely protective, had hosted dinner parties legendary for bringing together Kansas City's most interesting personalities. Tonight's gathering was more intimate, just 8 people at his restored Victorian in the West Bottoms district. I arrived fashionably late, bearing an expensive bottle of Spanish Red. Anthony greeted me with his customary bear hug, whispering, looking hot hues before ushering me into his eclectically decorated living room. The conversation paused momentarily as heads turned toward the newcomer. I recognized most faces, local artists, a renowned chef, Anthony's latest boyfriend. Then my heart stopped. Leslie White stood by the fireplace, a glass of wine in hand, engaged in animated conversation with someone. I didn't know she wore a simple black dress that skimmed her knees, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. When she spotted me, her smile widened perceptibly. "You know, Leslie," Anthony murmured, following my gaze. We've been working together." I managed, suddenly intensely aware of my own rapid pulse. "Small world." "She's Melanie +1. He nodded toward a redhead I vaguely recognized from gallery openings. Old friends from college. Apparently, throughout dinner, I found myself hyper aware of Leslie's presence across the table. She caught my eye, occasionally sharing private smiles when someone said something particularly outrageous. Each time that strange flutter returned to my St. Zoe's company. "Just landed the Westside Development account," Anthony announced proudly as dessert was served. "Tell them about your visionary approach, darling," as I described the campaign. Leslie's attentive gaze never wavered. She asked insightful questions that highlighted connections I hadn't fully articulated, making me appear more brilliant than I felt the dynamic between us, this intellectual dance, felt more intimate than any interaction I'd had in years. Your work compliments Zoe perfectly, Melanie observed, looking between Leslie and me with curious eyes. You should collaborate more often. Something in her tone made me wonder if she'd noticed our chemistry. I shifted uncomfortably, suddenly needing air. Anthony, still have that bourbon you've been hiding? I asked, standing abruptly. I could use a breath on the porch. He nodded knowingly, retrieving a bottle from a cabinet. Take your time, we're moving to charade soon, and you know how competitive William gets. The night air held the first hint of autumn coolness as I settled onto Anthony's porch, swing the bourbon, warming my throat. Stars pierced the urban sky in rare patches between clouds, and I found myself exhaling tension I hadn't realized I was holding mine some company. Leslie stood in the doorway, two fresh glasses in hand. Anthony sent reinforcements, she explained, setting the glasses down and joining me on the swing. Said something about you needing liquid courage. Before Cherie, we sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, the swing's gentle motion hypnotic in the night air. You've been avoiding looking at me all evening, Leslie finally said, her voice gentle rather than accusatory. The denial fell flat, even to my own ears. Leslie shifted, turning to face me more directly. Zoe, I need to ask something, and I want honesty. I misread things between us. The directness of the question knocked the air from my lungs in the dimness of the porch, with cicadas providing rhythmic background noise. Pretense felt impossible. I don't know what's happening, I admitted, staring into my bourbon. I haven't felt this way in maybe ever, and it terrifies me. What part terrifies you most? Her question was soft, patient. All of it. That you're a woman, that I'm freshly divorced, that I can't stop thinking about you. The confession tumbled out before I could censor it, that I'm 38 years old and questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. Leslie's hand found mine in the darkness, her touch sending electricity up my arm. For what it's worth, I can't stop thinking about you either. The moment stretched between us, heavy with possibility. She leaned closer, her perfume enveloping me, her intent clear in the slight parting of her lips. My heart hammered against my ribs as I found myself leaning in as well. There you are. Anthony's voice shattered the moment as the porch light flicked on. We're starting charades, and I've claimed you both for my team. William's talking trash already. Leslie withdrew her hand from mine with visible reluctance as we followed Anthony inside. She whispered, to be continued. The question hung between us for the remainder of the evening, through charades, through goodnight hugs, through the Uber ride back to my empty penthouse. Alone in my bed, I stared at the ceiling, replaying what had almost happened in my mind. One thought kept circling: what might have happened if Anthony hadn't interrupted us. I hadn't slept properly in days. Leslie's almost kiss haunted my dreams, leaving me distracted during meetings and unfocused during client calls. Even Carol had noticed, gently removing a coffee mug from my hand when I'd been staring into it for 5 straight minutes. Earth to Zoe, she'd said, your 11 o'clock canceled, want me to reschedule the afternoon so you can take a personal day. I'd refused. Of course, work had always been my refuge, but as I drove home that evening through Kansas City's rush hour traffic, Leslie's face kept appearing in my mind, those green eyes holding questions I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. Rain started falling as I approached an intersection 3 blocks from my building, gentle at first, then a sudden downpour that reduced visibility to smears of headlights and traffic signals. My phone buzzed with a text notification. Foolishly, I glanced down. It was Leslie, been thinking about the other night. The light ahead turned red. I slammed on my brakes, but the wet pavement extended my stopping distance. My car slid forward, the anti-lock brakes judder beneath my foot. The sickening crunch of metal on metal filled my ears as I rear-ended the car that had stopped properly at the light. Damn it. I pounded the steering wheel, already calculating insurance increases and repair costs. Perfect end to a perfect day. I grabbed my purse and stepped out into the rain, instantly drenched as I approached the other vehicle, a sensible Volvo that had suffered minor damage to its bumper, the driver's door opened, and I prepared. My apology, the words died in my throat as Leslie White emerged shaking water from her blonde hair. Zoe, her expression shifted from irritation to recognition to concern in the span of seconds. You okay, Leslie? I stood frozen rain, plastering my blouse to my skin of all the cars in Kansas. City, she laughed, the sound bright, even through the drumming rain. What are the chances? Are you hurt? I shook my head, water streaming down my face, just my pride and possibly my insurance premium. A car honked behind us, reminding us we were blocking traffic. Leslie gestured to the curb, letting move over and exchange information. We maneuvered our vehicles to a nearby parking lot by the time I joined. Leslie, under the inadequate shelter of a store awning, we were both thoroughly soaked, water ripped from her eyelashes as she examined the damage to her car, that she assessed mostly cosmetic. I'm so sorry, I said, wringing water from my sleeve. I stopped, unable to admit. I've been distracted by her text, by the rain it came out of nowhere she pulled out. Her phone let me call for a tow for your car. The front end looks worse as we waited for the tow truck standing close. Together under her umbrella, an awkward silence fell between us. The almost kiss from Anthony's dinner party hung in the air, unacknowledged. Yet impossible to ignore your text, I finally blurted. That's what distracted me. I looked down when it came. Through Leslie's eyes widened. You crashed because of my text. What terrible timing. She hesitated, then added softly, though. I've been trying to find the courage to send it all day. The rain intensified, drumming against the umbrella, creating a private world around us. Water trickled down my neck, but I barely noticed. What were you going to say? I asked, my voice barely audible above the downpour in the text. Wesley's gaze held mine, rain and streetlights reflecting in her eyes, that I haven't been able to think about anything else, that I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable, that I'd understand if you wanted to keep things professional. Is that what you want? The question escaped before I could reconsider it. No, she answered simply, it's not. A raindrop slid down her cheek like a tear, and without thinking, I reached up to brush it away. My fingers lingered against her skin, the contact sending warmth through my rain-chilled body. I don't know how to do this, I whispered, do it. Her voice was equally soft. Feel this way about a woman, about anyone. Really, I swallowed hard after Anthony. I thought I was done with feelings. Leslie's free hand found mine, our cold fingers intertwining. We don't have to define it. We don't have to rush. A small smile played at her lips, though crashing your car to avoid talking about it seems a bit extreme. The tension broke as we both laughed, the sound mingling with the rain. In that moment, something shifted. The uncertainty didn't disappear, but it transformed into something manageable, something almost exciting. When the tow truck's headlights illuminated us minutes later, we were still holding hands beneath the umbrella, my head slightly inclined toward her shoulder. Let me drive you home, Leslie offered as my car was loaded onto the flatbed in her Volvo. Heater blasting against the chill, she shared stories from her childhood on the farm, her first tractor ride, summer thunderstorms, viewed from the safety of their porch, her father's lessons about respecting the land. By the time we reached my building, the rain had softened to a gentle patter, and something new had formed between us, a connection forged in the chaos of unexpected collision. Thank you, I said as she pulled to the curb. Not just for the ride. Leslie smiled, the streetlight casting gentle shadows across her face. Sometimes accidents turn out to be the best things that happen to us. As I watched her drive away, I realized the fortune in our misfortune, how a moment of distraction had created an opportunity for honesty we might otherwise have avoided. For weeks, the morning after our accident, I called my sister. Emily had always been my voice of reason, stable, married 15 years with 2 kids in a house in the suburbs. She answered on the third ring, the sound of her kindergarten classroom chaotic in the background. Can you talk? I asked, pacing my kitchen in bare feet and yesterday's wrinkled blouse. 5 minutes before the monsters returned from recess. What's up? I took a deep breath. I think I'm attracted to a woman The silence lasted 3 beats before Emily responded, and that's it. I've been straight my entire life, Emily. I was married to a man for 8 years, to a man who cheated on you repeatedly. She countered, look, Zoe's sexuality isn't always fixed. Sometimes we connect with people, not genders. Her matter-of-fact response deflated my panic somewhat. But what does this make me confused? Having a midlife crisis? Emily's laugh was gentle, it made. Makes you human. Tell me about her. As I described Leslie, her confidence, her passion for sustainable design. The way she listened, as if every word mattered, my sister's kindergartners. Flooded back into her classroom. Sorry, duty call, she said over the rising den. But Zoe, stop overthinking this. You deserve happiness, whatever package it comes in. After hanging up, I stared at the still unopened envelope from Anthony. Whatever revelations it contained seemed increasingly irrelevant to my present. With sudden determination, I shoved it into a drawer beneath old takeout menus for the next week. Leslie and I circled each other, cautiously professional texts. Evolved into personal check-ins, a quick coffee to discuss project details, stretched into lunch, each interaction charged with unspoken possibility. I found myself noticing things I'd never paid attention to before: the graceful movement of her hands when she spoke, the different shades of green in her eyes depending on what she wore, the small scar near her left eyebrow from a childhood fall. Then came the Pine Ridge development disaster. Our biggest client threatened to pull their account after a competitor undercut our bid. I spent 14 hours in crisis meetings, emerging exhausted and defeated to find Leslie waiting in the lobby, concern evident in her expression. Carol called me. She explained, rising from the leather sofa, said, "You might need rescuing from yourself tonight." My defenses crumbled instantly. They're giving us 48 hours to revise our proposal. Leslie took my briefcase from my limp hand. When did you last eat breakfast, maybe? The day had blurred into endless spreadsheets and desperate negotiations. That settles it. She guided me toward the exit. My place is closer. I'm making you dinner. Leslie's apartment occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in the Crossroads district. All exposed brick, large windows, and an open floor plan filled with plants and natural light. I felt immediately like her. Authentic, thoughtful, beautiful, without trying too hard. I sank onto a bar stool at her kitchen island, watching as she moved confidently through her cooking routine. Chopping vegetables, searing chicken, uncorking wine, the domesticity of the moment struck me with unexpected force. My sister thinks I should stop overthinking things. I blurted, accepting the glass of Chardonnay. Leslie offered her knife, paused mid-chop. What things this us, whatever's happening between us. Leslie resumed chopping, her focus on the cutting board. And what do you think is happening between us, Zoe? The question hung in the air, demanding honesty I'd been avoiding. I took a large sip of wine for courage. I think I'm falling for you, I said quietly, and it terrifies me. Leslie sat down her knife and moved around the island until she stood before me, close enough that I could smell her perfume mingled with the cooking aromas. Why does it terrify you? Because I don't know who I am anymore. I admitted the divorce, the company's struggles, and now these feelings. My voice broke slightly. I'm standing on quicksand. Leslie's eyes held mine, searching. Maybe that's not such a bad place to be. Sometimes we need everything to shift before we can find solid ground again. She reached out slowly, giving me time to retreat if I wanted, and touched my cheek. Her palm home was warm against my skin, steady where I felt anything. But I'm not asking for promises, she said softly. I'm just asking for you to be present here now with me. The last threads of my resistance dissolved under her touch. I leaned forward, closing the distance between us until our lips met tentatively at first, then with growing certainty. Her mouth was soft, tasting of wine and possibility, and as her arms circled my waist, I felt something long dormant awaken within me. We moved from the kitchen to the living room, dinner temporarily forgotten on her sofa beneath the glow of city lights streaming through uncurtained windows. Exploration became education. Leslie teaching my body things it had never known. my hands discovering the differences and surprising similarities in loving a woman later wrapped in a borrowed robe. I watched Leslie salvage our dinner, her movements relaxed and content in a way that suggested this outcome had been inevitable. All along, stop looking at me like that, she said, without turning around like you're cataloging every detail. For future reference, now she did turn her smile, knowing I'm not going anywhere. Zoe, this wasn't just tonight. Relief flooded through me stronger than I'd expected. Good, I said simply. We ate at her small dining table, trading stories and small confessions. Between bites, for the first time since my marriage imploded, I felt truly not as Anthony's ex-wife, not as Hughes Marketing's cutthroat CEO, but simply as Zoe, complicated and newly vulnerable. I stayed the night. The weeks that followed were a blur of discovery. Leslie and I established a rhythm, business meetings that evolved into dinners, weekends, exploring hidden corners of Kansas. City quiet evenings, discussing everything from sustainable architecture to childhood memories. The envelope remained unopened in my drawer, a relic from a past life that seemed increasingly distant. Then Anthony texted on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly projections. Need to talk, important coffee. Today we met at a neutral location, a corporate coffee chain near his office downtown. He looked thinner than I remembered, his expensive suit hanging slightly loose around the shoulders. Thanks for meeting me, he said, sliding a paper cup toward me. I've been trying to reach you. I've been busy. An understatement. Between saving the Pine Ridge account and my evolving relationship with Leslie, I'd had little time for anything else. Anthony shifted uncomfortably. I miss you, Zoe. The words hung between us like a bad joke. You miss me after what? You did. I made mistakes, terrible ones. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine before I pulled away. But what we had. 8 years, that doesn't just disappear. It does when you empty our savings account and sleep with your assistant. His expression turned pleading. I was going through something, a midlife crisis or breakdown, whatever you want to call it. He leaned forward. I've been in therapy. I'm different now. A month ago, these words might have affected me, might have reopened old wounds or kindled fate hope. Now they simply rang hollow. What do you want, Anthony? Another chance we could start over. I studied his face, once so familiar, now belonging to a stranger. No, we can't. Why not? A hint of the old entitlement crept into his voice. Is there someone else? Leslie's face flashed in my mind, her smile that morning as she kissed me goodbye, wearing nothing but my shirt. Yes, I said simply. There is. His eyes narrowed. Who's someone at the firm, that consultant you hired when? I remained silent as frustration mounted. Damn, Zoe. I deserve to know. You deserve nothing. The calm in my voice surprised even me, but for what it's worth, I'm happy, really happy. Maybe for the first time something in my tone must have convinced him, because his shoulders slumped in defeat. Well, I guess that's that. Then as I walked away, I felt lighter, as if I'd finally set down a burden I'd been carrying far too long. That evening, Leslie joined me at a company gala, not officially as my date, but everyone noticed our arrive together. We mingled separately at first, maintaining professional distance while exchanging glances across the room. Wilson Hathaway, our biggest potential new client, cornered me by the bar. Hughes, just the woman I wanted to see. Your team's presentation yesterday was impressive. As we discussed contract details, I spotted Leslie chatting with board members nearby. She caught my eye, raising her glass slightly in silent acknowledgement. And who's that you keep? Keep looking at Wilson followed my gaze. White architecture, right, brilliant work on the riverfront project. You two collaborating? We've been exploring some joint ventures, I replied carefully. Smart move, complementary strengths. He drained his scotch. Bring her into our next meeting. I'd like to hear how you both envision the Westport expansion. When Wilson departed, a junior account executive approached nervously. Miss Hughes, your friend, Miss White, wanted me to tell you she's waiting in the lobby. I found Leslie leaning against a marble column, scrolling through her phone. Everything okay? I asked. Just needed air, and she hesitated. I noticed how you introduced me to the board chair. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? This is Leslie White. She's working with us on the Pine Ridge project, not colleague, not friend. Certainly not. Her voice trailed off. We're at a work function, I said, defensively, professional boundaries don't. Leslie's eyes flashed. I'm not asking for a public announcement. Zoe, but I won't be your dirty secret either. The elevator doors opened to scoring more attendees. Without thinking, I pulled Leslie into an alcove off the main lobby. You're not a secret. I insisted. I'm just not ready to what admit you're with. A woman, I thought we were past that it's complicated. Leslie's laugh held no humor. It's always complicated with you, your divorce, your company, your identity. Crisis, her words stung because they contain truth that's not fair neither, is introducing. The woman you've been sleeping with for weeks is just a business associate. She shook her head. I need to go, Leslie. Wait, call me when you figure out what you want. Zoe, who you want. I watched her walk through the revolving door, angry steps carrying her into the night around the corner. The gala continued, champagne-flowing deals, forming appearances contained for a moment. I stood frozen, caught between running after Leslie and returning to the safety of the professional world I built. Then my phone chimed with a text from Wilson. Where'd you go? The CEO wants to meet you. I straightened my dress, composed my features, and returned to the ballroom, but the triumph I should have felt at Wilson's interest tasted like ashes in my mouth. The drive to my parents' suburban home felt longer than usual, each mile marker heightening my anxiety after 3 days of Leslie's silence, 3 days of composing texts I never sent and picking up the phone only to set it down again. I'd made my decision. Mom's award-winning roses greeted me as I pulled into the driveway at Dad's golf clubs, leaned against the garage wall, freshly cleaned after his Saturday morning round, everything exactly as it had been throughout my childhood. Predictable, traditional, unchanging. There's my girl, Mom called from the kitchen as I entered, the scent of her famous pot roast filling the house just in time to set the table. Sunday dinners had been our tradition since I moved out at 18. Even during my marriage, Anthony and I had rarely missed them since the divorce. These meals had become a comforting constant, though. I'd skipped the last 3 weekends making excuses about work while actually spending time with Leslie. Where's Dad? I asked, accepting Mom's quick hug basement, watching golf highlights. Call them up before the roast dries out throughout dinner. I maintained the expected conversation updates on the business commentary on Dad's golf game, responses to Mom's gentle probing about whether I was taking care of myself. They were careful, not to mention Anthony, a kindness I appreciated, but no longer needed as Mom served coffee and her apple crumble in the living room. Dad turned down the television volume, his signal that family conversation was now the priority. You seemed distracted tonight, sweetheart, Mom observed, passing me a dessert plate. Trouble at work? I sat down, my fork stomach suddenly tight. Not exactly. They waited expectantly, these parents who had supported me through honors classes and heartbreaks, business launches, and divorce. Their love constant, if sometimes expressed through conventional expectations. I've met someone, I said. Finally, my voice steadier than I'd anticipated. Mom's face brightened immediately. That's wonderful. When can we meet him? The moment stretched before me, a crossroads between continued half-truths and complete honesty. I thought of Leslie walking away at the gala, her evident in every line of her body. Her name is Leslie, I said quietly, and I'm in love with her. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Dad's coffee cup paused midway to his lips. Mom's hand froze on the desert server. I don't understand, Mom finally said, her voice small. I'm dating a woman, Mom. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something I was looking for, but it happened, and she's incredible. Dad cleared his throat. You were married to Anthony for 8 years? Yes, and now I'm falling in love with Leslie. I met his gaze directly. I'm still me, Dad, my mother's hands twisted in her lap. Is this because of the divorce? Some kind of reaction to what Anthony did? No, the certainty. And my voice surprised even me. This is about Leslie, who she is, how she makes me feel, the person I am when I'm with her. Another sill descended, this one heavier than before. Then my father did something unexpected. He reached for my hand. You've always known your own mind, Zoe, he said. Gruffly, even as a little girl, your mother and I, we may need some time to adjust to this news. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. It's just not what we imagined for you. It's not what I imagined for myself either. I admitted, but it's real. She's real, the conversation continued. Haltingly, their questions cautious, my answers honest by the time. I left nothing was resolved, but neither had any bridges been burned as Dad hugged me goodbye. He whispered, "We love you," no matter what words that carried me through the drive home the following morning. I arrived at the office early, determined to focus on work. Instead, I found myself staring at Leslie's business card, turning it over and over between my fingers. Pride comes before a fall, my grandmother's favorite saying code in my mind as I finally picked up my phone and dialed. "I didn't expect to hear from you," Leslie answered, her voice carefully neutral. "I told my parents about us yesterday." A pause. "How did that go about as well as you'd expect for conservative Midwesterners whose daughter surprises them with a same-sex relationship, but they didn't disown me, so progress." Leslie's soft laugh warmed something cold inside me. "That something can we talk in person?" I hesitated. "I miss you." We agreed to meet at her cabin by the lake, a family property an hour outside Kansas City, where we'd spent a weekend early in our relationship. As I drove through falling autumn leaves, I rehearsed what I needed to say, the apologies and promises I hoped would rebuild what my fear had damaged. Leslie waited on the porch steps, wrapped in a chunky sweater against the October chill, seeing her blonde hair loose around her shoulders, those green eyes. Watching me approach, everything I'd planned to say evaporated. "I'm sorry," I said, simply standing before her. "I was afraid not of being with you, but of what that meant about me, about my life up until now." And now her voice was soft but unwavering. I sat beside her on the steps, our shoulders almost touching now. "I know that loving you doesn't negate my past. It just means I found something true, looks like. Hughes has herself a girlfriend." The whisper traveled across the conference room as I entered with Leslie beside me. 6 months since our reconciliation at the lake. Cabin 3 months since Leslie had moved into my penthouse. And still the gossip persisted in certain corners of Kansas City's business community. I straightened my shoulders, meeting the gaze of William Peterson, the accounting executive who'd made the comment. "Yes, I do have a girlfriend, William, and she's just secured the West Side development contract that your team said was impossible. Perhaps focus more on your projections and less on my personal life." His face flushed as Leslie suppressed a smile beside me as we took our seats for the quarterly business alliance meeting. She squeezed my hand briefly under the table, our private sign of solidarity. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes, I did. And I had meant every word, the journey from hiding our relationship to openly acknowledging. It hadn't been easy. I lost 2 conservative clients, gained 3 progressive ones, and discovered which friendships were genuine and which were merely convenient through it all. Leslie had remained my center patient when I stumbled, celebratory when I stood firm. That evening, I returned home early to find Leslie arranging white lies in a crystal vase, our penthouse, filled with the scent of spring despite the late winter chill outside. "What's the occasion?" I asked, setting down my briefcase. Leslie glanced at her watch. 6 months since the cabin, when you chose us over fear. I moved to her side, wrapping my arms around her waist from behind. "Best decision I ever made." She turned in my embrace, her green eyes serious. "I have something for you." From her pocket, she withdrew a small wrapped package. Inside, I found an antique silver compass, its face elegantly worn. "By time my grandfather gave this to my father when he left the farm for college," she explained. "Dad gave it to me when I started my business. It represents finding your true direction." Her fingers traced the compass rose. "You found your Zoe despite every obstacle." Emotion tightened my throat as I remembered the confusion and fear of those early days. How foreign my feelings had seemed, how terrified I'd been of what they meant. "We found ours," I corrected, later curled together on our balcony, overlooking the Kansas City skyline. Leslie asked the question that had been hovering between us for weeks. Have you thought more about Anthony's off offer? My ex-husband had approached us both after encountering us at a charity auction. His marketing firm in Chicago was expanding to additional markets, and he wanted Hughes Marketing to handle their Kansas City presence, a professional olive branch that had surprised us both. I'm inclined to accept, I admit it not because I need his forgiveness or approval, but because it's a good business decision. Leslie nodded. I think that's right. Shows how far you've come. The night sky glittered above us, stars competing with city lights. One thought about the girl who'd signed divorce papers a year ago, so certain her life had ended rather than simply changed course. How could I have known then that losing what I thought I wanted would lead me to what I truly needed? What are you thinking about? Leslie asked, noticing my silence. That unopened envelope from Anthony, I found it when we were packing your things into the penthouse. I'd finally read its contents, simply the final division of some invest accounts, nothing revelatory. I was so afraid of what it might contain, what truths it might force me to face. Leslie smiled, and now I understand that truth isn't something to fear. It's what sets us free. The following morning dawned clear and bright, unusual for early March in Kansas City. I woke before Leslie, watching the sunlight play across her sleeping features, the curve of her cheek, the slight flutter of her eyelashes, the softness around her mouth that appeared only in these unguarded moments, as if sensing my gaze. She opened her eyes, morning, she murmured, voice still thick with sleep. You're staring, just appreciating the view. She stretched cat-like before rising to make coffee our weekend ritual, now as familiar as breathing. I followed her to the kitchen, enjoying the domesticity that had once seemed so impossible to imagine. Leslie handed me my mug, black one sugar, and raised her own to 6 months, and counting, I clinked my mug against hers, overwhelmed suddenly by gratitude for this woman who had shown me that love didn't have to be what I'd always imagined, that the heart recognizes truth, even when the mind struggles to categorize it. I love you. I said simply, the words no longer frightening, but liberating. Leslie's smile rivaled the morning sun. I know outside on the balcony, Kansas City was awakening traffic, increasing pedestrians hurrying toward weekend plans, life unfolding in all its messy glory. Standing beside Leslie, watching our city emerge from shadow into light, I finally understood that some questions don't need answers, some paths reveal themselves only by walking them, and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply follow our hearts home.